Horizon Zero Dawn, a game that throws you into a complete world filled with different cultures, environments, histories, and some giant machines that will stomp on you if you get in the way.
But how does the game make this bizarre future world feel so believably real? Obviously, there are stunning graphic backdrops, archaic ruins to explore from the metal world, and a huge cast of characters to interact with. This all creates a world that you can exist in, but Horizon Zero Dawn goes a step further by providing rich additional lore and found items that make you feel that yes, this is a world where other people have existed as well.
The game provides two main stories to uncover as you play through Aloy's adventures. First, there are the stories of the world that is and its recent history. These are the ones that hinge around the Kaja Sundom's recent exploits relating to their previous Sun King, their raids on the Nora, and their new alliance with the Yosaram. While some additional quests and the DLC Frozen Wilds also take you into the lands of the Banuk.
And then there are the stories of the world that was, the metal world, the world of the ancients. That's us. While both of these stories are told through a combination of strategies, the stories of the world that is are more likely to be told through classic quest lines and character interactions, since there are plenty of people still alive to tell you about those stories. Whereas the stories of the world that was are those told through a combination of smaller interactions with characters like Sylens, and a heavier focus on the found objects in the game and information scattered throughout the landscape that allows you to piece together the history of this world.
These items are our main focus here. This is obviously not the first game to use found items as a storytelling device. Skyrim, for example, has huge bodies of lore scattered throughout the world in its oh so many books. Some may even say there are too many.
338 books, 316,000 words.
If you read through every one of those books, I applaud you, but I didn't find them to be compelling enough to read every single one.
Should you read every book in Skyrim? No! Don't read them!
Horizon Zero Dawn, on the other hand, uses this technique very well, and we're going to take a look at what makes this device function so effectively within this story.
The most important found item in the game is the focus. It gives access to many of the other found items in the form of data points, holograms, audio recordings, and text files that the majority of people in the world of the game would not be able to access. But the focus is also a key story element in and of itself, and works to define Aloy's unusual character within the world.
The game opens by showing us a young, precocious outcast stumbling across this ancient, or futuristic by our standards, device in old ruins that are forbidden ground under Nora law. But they cast her out, so what are they going to do about it? This focus allows the young Aloy to learn about her surroundings by having access to a huge wealth of information, even if she doesn't understand it all at first. This information appears to be presented in a pure and unbiased manner, without value judgment, unlike, say, the internet.
Up to this point, Aloy has been raised by a single father figure, fellow outcast Rost. While he's supportive, he has a narrow view of the world, and the focus ends up acting as a sort of surrogate parent cum teacher and helps Aloy to build a more developed viewpoint on some things. We can imagine that this mysterious knowledge that Rost struggles to understand might help to fuel Aloy's rebellious nature, along with her sense that she knows better than the leaders she encounters who work to enforce their dogmatic beliefs.
The focus sets her apart from many others in the game. It ceases to be a unique quality as we slowly come across more and more characters who use focuses. Foci? It grants her the ability to follow tracks that others cannot see, find information when others only see debris, and affect ancient technology that civilizations have built their entire religions around, leading to her eventually having a chosen one status, although her genetics help here too. So the focus gives Aloy access to these data points, but how do these data points themselves function, you ask?
Well, the three types of data point are largely tiered by how relevant they are to the main plot threads versus how much they're just world building. This is indicated by how easy they are to find and how easy they are to interact with. First comes the game's holograms. They are, if not unmissable, then obvious enough to the casual playthrough that you would have to be trying not to interact with them if you were going to miss what they contain.
These are usually images from the ancient world and contain the narratives of the scientists and generals that led to both the original catastrophe and the implementation of Project Zero Dawn. These scenes are an interesting twist on the traditional video game cutscene, a device that the game uses fairly sparingly, and instead serves to provide the story in a format where you can move around, get a closer look at interactions in the surroundings, and generally remain engaged rather than laying your controller down, stretching a bit, and just letting the cutscene play off in the distance.
Next come the audio logs. These tend to require you to explore your surroundings to find them, but they're not usually well hidden. The game is using the unearthing of the story to encourage you to explore these strange locales as Aloy might, and get a better sense of the world she inhabits, and also to spend more time looking at all the hard work the graphics designers put into each area. Audio logs tend to contain information tied to the main story, but in a way that's generally fleshing it out rather than providing key information.
Take the initial bunker Aloy finds as a child. You can waltz right on through the room full of dead people and take away the message, "These people died in this bunker." Or you can take your child protagonist for a delightful tour of millennia dead bodies and interact with each of their audio recordings. In these, we get the initial puzzle pieces for the catastrophe that ended the ancient civilization, and these individuals' decisions to take their lives.
It's a gruesome experiment in world building that sets up the use of these audio points throughout the game as a way for you to understand how the world got to where it is now, and makes the main story and its characters feel even more alive by demonstrating the human cost of past decisions. A particular benefit of these recordings is that you can continue to listen to them as you explore the area. You don't have to stop and read for a while. However, sometimes you do.
This brings us to the text data points. These can be in plain view, hidden on a high shelf, or in the middle of an apparently random field on the world map. While these are the most missable points, they also do the most to expand the world beyond just the main story being told. They're split into two types. There's text data points quest and text data points world.
The former is primarily made up of logs, communications, and internal documentation from those behind the attempts to save humanity, and some from the offices of the companies responsible for the end of the previous civilization. In these, we get a view of the rise of the machines as a humanitarian effort to help the environment, and see how they turned into killing machines under pressures from capitalist and militaristic interests.
One of the key sets of logs here are those that document the attempts with Odyssey, a plan to create a spaceship on which a portion of the human race could survive, but supposedly failed. Whether we'll see this revisited in Forbidden West, we'll find out soon, hopefully.
In another selection, we get detailed logs from Dr. Elizabeth Sobek that focus on her personal experiences and progress tied to saving the planet, paired with documents that flesh out the characters of the Alphas, the minds behind Zero Dawn, ranging from noise complaints related to a colleague's listening to Bashcore, to the note of rejection regarding the same Alpha's submission of his personal porn stash to the archive of crucial human knowledge.
Another of the most memorable internal memos discusses the damaging optics of a swarm of machines devouring a pod of endangered dolphins to be used as biofuel. This serves to A. show how the robots function, B. show the progression of the damage that they cause to the environment, and C. demonstrate the fact that the firms involved are most concerned with the PR fallout from such an event rather than the loss of an endangered species. All of these elements seem suspiciously similar to things that are going on in our own world. It's a strange coincidence.
While the world data points don't tie as directly to the main quest, they provide additional flavor and go a long way toward making the world feel genuine. Some remain tied to how the world got to where it is, with news articles about bioterrorism, the public response to casualties in war, and documentation about the refugees that had to flee from machines. But you also find more benign information that shows how our culture might have continued and warped with this new technology, documents that feel familiar to us, but also showcase what happened in the world before it ended. You can come across adverts for drone food delivery, forum posts complaining about particular fandoms, and even the occasional spam email.
While Skyrim feels the need to provide full narratives in its history textbooks, Horizon Zero Dawn does something clever with these entries to keep the game moving and the player engaged. By having the data corrupted, you often get a snippet of a larger document that cuts off apparently randomly. This helps to keep the piece shorter than you might expect it to be, while making it clear to the audience that there is more to be implied and helping them to extrapolate from the ideas which are presented.
By looking at these three types of data points from the perspective of that central story, you can see how the progression of Sobek and Pharaoh's relationship has played out in each of them. In holograms, we see them interacting in the most plot-relevant of ways. We see the antagonism, the shared history, and the power differential that each seems to occasionally miscalculate.
In the audio recordings, we get Sobek's personal feelings as she spends little time on Pharaoh, seeing him as a nuisance, an underestimation that can be read as enabling Pharaoh to carry out his plan to remove the Alphas later on. Meanwhile, through text documents, we get a fully fleshed out history in the form of articles about Sobek's rise in Pharaoh's company due to her work on environmental robots and her later exit over ethical concerns when Pharaoh sells out to the military. We could play the entire game with only the holograms to guide us through the story. But if the player puts in the work for those additional pieces, they get to experience a more complete world.
The final note on those data points is the way that they serve to supplement the current world's perspective of itself and of the metal world, providing both historical and anthropological assessments, often giving the player as much insight into the culture that wrote the document as that which it is written about.
A smaller number of the text points are written as journals or books by people in the current era, most often the Kaja, as the Banuk and the Nora both seem to favour oral traditions, and the Oseram seem to prefer machinery? Alcohol? Maybe diagrams? I don't know. Anyway, these function as an interesting counterpoint to the text from the Old World. While with the Old World texts we read certain perspectives into the scenes being described and judge the honesty of the author by our own perceptions of our own similar world, with these current era pieces we're put in a position to use Aloy's perspective on the world.
When we read the histories of the Sun King that are scattered across the Sundom, we think over Aloy's perspective as a Nora and think, wait a minute, that doesn't sound quite right. It brings Aloy and the Nora to life by challenging their perception, as well as showing the way that histories can be skewed to put people in a better light. Light. Because sun? This is highlighted in the histories of the Sun King and those that accept his flaws as the sun-chosen king is dethroned. If he's there by divine right, how can he be wrong? It works to call the whole culture into question and emboldens Aloy's challenging of their beliefs.
They can also serve to tell you what you're going to face in the future. Any player reading the history of the Hunting Lodge and the details of the giant Thunderjaw Redmaw that has never been defeated and doesn't think, I'm going to have to fight that later, might never have played a game or read a book before.
We can also see how the Karja view other societies through these, and it enables the game to provide details that would otherwise feel contrived to include. While the Karja and Nora relations are clear from the Karja's interactions with Aloy, and you meet plenty of Oseram who work alongside the Karja, it's rare to see Banuk and Karja intermingle.
One of the few that you do meet outside of the Banuk lands is this guy,
Can I just scent your fingers?
who the Karja have declined to interact with and who might not be representative of the society as a whole. You do, however, find an anthropological treatise by a Karja who spent some time with the Banuk. He's disdainful of their practices and seems to earn their disdain as well by his failure to honour their beliefs. This dichotomy helps to build a relationship between the tribes that you never actually see play out within the main game.
It's worth mentioning that the Karja anthropologist is a terrible ethnographer, completely fails to engage in participant observation, and forgets that the idea is to understand a culture from the point of view of the people whose culture it is. Instead, he imposes a ton of value judgments from his own culture onto the Banuk's practices. It's an excellent and concise example of how not to be an ethnographer.
Beyond the data points, there are other items of varying scarcity that all tell their own little bit of the world. This extends even to some of the items that you can find in the ancient remains and how they've been misclassified by the current world. While you'll find that the item names in the inventory menu are things such as ancient chimes or ancient toothpick, on closer inspection of these images, it becomes clear that they are in fact, respectively, a set of car keys and a bottle opener, the latter of which makes me wince just thinking of it.
Of particular interest here are the items Ancient Necklace, which some posit represents a pacemaker, the Ancient Sculpture, which looks suspiciously like an artificial heart, and the Ancient Metal Eye, which appears to be a bionic eye. These all demonstrate the movement of medical engineering in the world before it was destroyed, and leaves a slightly morbid implication that you found the metal that remained behind after a corpse rotted away or was converted into biofuel.
The most notable of these misclassified items is the set of collectibles Ancient Vessels that one trader wishes you to collect, claiming that they are special relics saved for ritual practice and perhaps part of a ritualistic shaving routine.
They consist of a hollow cylinder with a crescent handle affixed at both ends.
When examined, it is clear that these are novelty coffee cups with random logos on them. When Aloy suggests that maybe the ancients just drank beverages from them, the trader scoffs at her foolishness, succinctly commenting on gender bias and the problems with understanding other cultures through your own lens in one fell narrative swoop. This sort of interaction, in which Aloy posits something rational as a response to someone's faith-based or presumptive argument, and is then mocked for it, does sort of sum up the whole game, but maybe that's a topic for another video.
The coffee cups, as a specifically hidden collectible, lead us to the last set of story devices, stories that are intentionally hidden from the player. You can buy treasure maps to help track these items down, which I appreciate, but these are the most missable of the stories. Two of the other sets of collectibles work in parallel ways, the Vantages and the Banuk figurines.
The Vantages tell a story of the world that was, as a Pharaoh employee with a troubled childhood travels the area leaving cached recordings that contain musings on the fall of the world and his own past. The collectibles provide a contained story and also serve to provide you a real glimpse into the past, a fun moment for the developers to show you how they made certain areas the ruins of past structures, giving even the landscape a tangible past. His story works to give a view of issues in the old world with society and the military, and to provide a first-hand account of the deteriorating world from the perspective of someone who was not involved in Zero Dawn and was powerless to affect the outcomes.
Alongside this are the Banuk figures that you can find hidden high up on mountains, surrounded by ritual drawings and seen as sacred areas. This is very much a story of the world that is now, providing a glimpse into the Banuk's cultural practices and their beliefs. These collectibles tell the story of a man who was banished after being wrongly accused of murdering his chief. He is aware that the child of the chief was actually his child and that he will never see or claim that child. Instead, he addresses these stories to his child. This is where these stories work so well together. The vantages are addressed to the character's mother, who has died without him having a chance to say goodbye. They're looking back at the end of an era and addressing a person who will never hear his story because they're already gone. Meanwhile, the Banuk figures are addressed to a new life and look forward. It's still unlikely that the addressee will ever receive the story, but they're filled with the hope for the future from a man's personally dark time. These two stories encapsulate a huge part of the game's message as we see Aloy hunting for Sobek, who's been dead for a really long time, and finds Sobek's message at the end, which serves as a message to Aloy, sent long before Aloy was born.
Finally, we have the last collectible, the metal flowers. These metal flowers are found scattered across the world map and are always surrounded by a triangle of non-metal flowers. These flowers seem to be part of Gaia's reinvigoration of the ecosystem as missiles launch to propagate new species on what was once a barren planet. Each one contains a strange section of code where the focus has detected a section of dead code which includes a poem. These poems come from writers all across the world. There's a link below where someone has compiled all of the authors for them, but these elements are never discussed and instead left for the player to figure out on their own. I like to think that the workers behind propagating the world with the beauty of flowers wanted to share a little more knowledge and beauty. Of course, they would not know that the Apollo program would be disrupted and this might be the only remnants of their civilization's art. The decision to include these poems tells us more about the characters behind the flowers than any other single data point.
The importance of these flowers cannot be overstated, as the closing scenes of the game revolve around Aloy locating Sobek's remains, accompanied by a recording of Sobek's conversation with Gaia about an experience with her mother, which left her with the message that, quote, "Being smart will count for nothing if you don't make the world better. You have to use your smarts to count for something, to serve life, not death." This elegant message is key to what the game has been trying to convey throughout, and its beauty is emphasized as the camera pans out to show that Sobek is surrounded by one of those equilateral triangles of flowers as well.
Horizon Zero Dawn takes the open world form and crams a huge breadth of story into it for the player to find, if that is what they are looking for in their game. Sure, you can just run through attacking everything that moves, but exploring the narratives that are hidden within the game lets you appreciate the world and the messages that the game has put together.
If you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy our full podcast on Horizon Zero Dawn, which should be popping up on the screen right now and is also available wherever you generally listen to podcasts.
Thanks for listening. Please do comment, like, and subscribe, and all those other YouTube things. Details of the giant Thunderjaw, Redmaw, that has been never
defeated.
Yep,
That's what you were.
that's actually a
Definitely
direct quote from the game.
It's entirely what you intended
It's in
to
the
say.
Kaja logs.
Yep, sure.
Okay.
Has been never defeated.